Thank you for joining us today. My name is Yongki Hong, and I'm a senior associate at Scar Legal PC. Today's webinar will focus on how to get an EB-5 investor green card. We are very fortunate to have our firm's managing partner, Ian Scott, as the speaker for today's presentation. Ian has given many presentations on this topic over the years, and he's well known among immigration attorneys for his expertise. I'm confident that he will share many valuable insights with us today. Before we dive in, let me briefly introduce our firm and go over a few housekeeping items. We are a full-service immigration law firm, and we offer representation across a wide range of practice areas, including E2, O1, TN, L1, H1B, and all types of employment and family-based green card cases. That said, we are also particularly well known for our work in the complicated EB-5 green card cases, and we have built a strong reputation through our comprehensive approaches and strategies. We have processed hundreds of EB-5 cases and have been able to secure approvals for the vast majority of them. At the end of this webinar, we'll send you several useful tools, a copy of the PowerPoint presentation we'll go through today, a link where you can download the guidelines with more details on visa options, a link to sign up for additional webinars, a link to webinar recording on YouTube. We definitely encourage you to subscribe and hit the notification button as we regularly post immigration related videos. And lastly, a link where you can set up a private consultation with our team. Finally, for any questions, please type them into the chat box or Q&A box. We'll address all the questions at the end of the presentation. And with that, let's get started.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Yonki. It's great to be here today. And when we think of EB-5 program, the EB-5 program, we really are looking at two subsets of the program that are quite different. And those are the Regional Center EB-5 program and the Direct Investment EB-5 program. So the Regional Center EB-5 program is a much more passive investment. And an example of that might be where someone is investing, or let's say the Hilton hotel chain wants to build a new hotel and they use the EB-5 program to raise capital. And then the individual investors are each investing an amount to invest in that particular program to obtain the green card. So in that instance, there is a regional center who facilitates all of that. So they do take a fairly significant administrative fee that could be $35,000 to $50,000. And then they collect the money from the investor and they facilitate the process so that in that case, example, the Hilton hotel chain could build the hotel, and then the Hilton hotel chain would also be responsible for creating the jobs that are required. One big difference between the Regional Center program and the Direct Investment program is that the Regional Center program can count, because there is a requirement that the EB-5 program create jobs, and the jobs that can be created when the program is a regional center is indirect jobs, and indirect jobs are really instead of being the people directly working for the entity, the people, what will happen is an economist might take a look at the particular Hilton chain, hotel chain, but then also might look down the street, there's a restaurant, and then there's a dry cleaner or a gas station or other businesses that are there as a result of the new hotel being there, and the economist will make a report that says that as a result of that hotel being there, there are a number of indirect jobs that are there, and that is something that can be utilized as well to meet the job requirement. In contrast, the direct investment, that is usually we see that when a person, let's say that they have an E2 visa or other investor visa, and they're in the United States and they are running their business and they want to invest the required amount of money and they want the control over the process themselves. So they want the potential for a higher return because the return when you're looking at a regional center project, it's usually going to be negative return when you take into account the high administration fee. And they just really want control over their own destiny. And that's one of the big differences between, or the big difference between the direct investment and the regional center. And as I said, that direct investment, typically you see that when someone is in the United States already. We had one E2 investor that was E2 that was based on a farm, and they had invested the required amount of money over time. And then they decided that they wanted to apply for the EB-5 program. Another example of a direct investment is we had an applicant who started a gym in the United States. It was a large gym, and they invested the required amount of money, and then they applied for the EB-5 green card as a result of that. So definitely they are separate and distinct. They are both part of the EB-5 program, but just have kind of differences in terms of who it is that is going to apply, but also some procedural differences as well, legal and procedural differences as well associated with them. So the next topic that we're going to talk about is going to be, if we could just switch the slide to the next slide, is going to be we're going to cover really what the two fundamental parts of the EB-5 program. So the one is the investment, and two is job creation. The third thing that we're going to cover is we're going to kind of go over exactly what has to be filed for an EB-5. So we'll cover all of those. So let's start out then with the investment requirement. So when you're looking at the investment requirement, so the big part of the EB-5 program is that you're required to invest a lot of money. So the money amount is going to be either $800,000 or $1,050,000. And this amount is going to be dependent on where the business is located. So the regulatory statute calls this business a new commercial enterprise. It doesn't have to be brand new. It's an enterprise that's created after 1990. And the difference between the two, the 800,000 or the 1,050,000, is really going to depend on whether or not you're investing in a targeted employment area. That is an area where the unemployment rate is 1.5 times the national average, or not, or a rural area. And if it's not a rural area or a targeted employment area, then you're going to be required to invest the 1,050,000. So the overwhelming majority of the investments are going to be at the $800,000 mark because over 90% of the EB-5s that are done are regional center. EB-5s and those regional center EB-5s always will be set up such that the investor is able to invest the lower amount. So that is very common. In terms of the EB-5 program is quite particular with respect to the investment and what can be included. So, for example, you can't include the administrative fee that you pay to the regional center, and you can't include the legal fees that you pay. So, legal and administrative fees can't the 800,000. They can't be used up for that, and it does have to be investment that you have that you actually have possession and control over. So if you have an entity that's set up that is earning income, so let's say you had an E2 entity and that E2 entity made $2 million in net profit, and then you thought to yourself, well, I have $2 million in net profit, so I can now just take that net profit and spend it in the next year and then apply for an EB-5. That's actually not correct. The money has to be in your possession and control before it hits the new commercial enterprise. And that could be the new commercial enterprise, the regional center project, or it could be the new commercial enterprise, the direct investment, but it does have to be in possession and control before that. There are significant differences between E2 and EB-5. The EB-5 is stricter, so there's a source of funds requirement, for example, where you have to prove that the money came from a legitimate source, and that is for EB-5. That is both E2 and EB-5 have that requirement, but the requirement for EB-5, it's much more like an audit. So that's really what you're looking at when you're doing the EB-5, whereas for E2, for the most part, depending on which country you're applying from, but for the most part, we don't provide that much information related to source of funds. It's much lighter than EB-5. The investment does have to be an equity investment, so you can't just kind of loan the new commercial enterprise money. So it can be any type of investment. It can be shares, it can be membership units, it can be limited partnership, and there's no requirement for how much you own. So the E2 does have the requirement that you own at least 50% if you're getting the investor visa. But the EB-5 doesn't have that requirement. It can be even a fraction of the share that you own. So the next big piece with related to EB-5 is job creation, and this again applies both for the regional center and the direct investment. And you are required to create 10 full-time jobs. And so let's look at these separately. So when you're looking at the regional center, the job creation for the most part, at least 90% of the jobs, because the regulations say at least 90% of the jobs can be related to indirect employees are usually created through indirect employees. So they are a function of that economist report that is developed. And that's where the majority of the jobs are created. But for direct investment, you have to create 10 full-time jobs, and those jobs have to be, people that are W-2 employees of the entity. And not only do they have to be W-2 employees, they have to be W-2 employees that are U.S. citizens or green card holders. So those are, that is essential with respect to that. And there also has to be a link between the investment and job creation. So the investment does have to be like, so for example, if you put money into the business when there already were 5 full-time jobs that existed, those 5 full-time jobs couldn't count towards the 10 because the money that you invested didn't have anything to do with creating those particular jobs. So the timing is very important, like when you actually make the investment amount. When you actually make the investment amount and when the jobs are created, those are very important. Often you do need a very detailed business plan to go through this. And the business plan is going to be used both if there's a regional center, because the business plan is going to outline exactly what the project is, exactly how you're going to hire the employees. It might refer to the economist report, even if it's a regional center. If it's a direct investment, the business plan also is going to be quite comprehensive and credible in terms of who you're hiring, when you plan on hiring them, and the job descriptions, et cetera. So all of that's going to be included. And then you do want to make sure that because the positions have to be full-time and they also have to be positions related to U.S. citizens or green card holders, you do want to make sure that you are using a system called E-Verify or something so you can actually document that they are qualified workers. So that's going to be important. So the third thing that we're going to talk about is the actual filing. So when you're filing an EB-5 petition, you're going to be filing an I-526 petition. So it's either going to be I-526 or I-526E, depending on whether it's a regional center or direct investment. And that's going to be the petition that shows that you have invested the required amount of money, that the source of funds is fine, that you are going to be able to meet the job requirements. And that is going to be filed with USCIS. And once that's filed, as long as the category is current, if you're in the United States, you can file an I-485. And if you file an I-485, the benefit of that is that you can actually also file a work authorization and travel authorization. If you're outside of the United States, you can do the process through consular processing. And then once you have the green card, after you've had the green card for 2 years, then you have to file another petition, an I-829 petition, and that petition is a petition to remove the conditions. So, and that's basically saying that you have actually created the 10 full-time jobs. And as a result of creating those 10 full-time jobs, you are in a position that you can get the conditions removed and actually have the green card issued for a 10-year period. So the first time it's issued, it's for a 2-year period. And once you've created the full-time jobs, it's issued for a 10-year period. So, in terms of the next slide, we are going to talk about some of the changes that happened in 2022. And some of them are, very important in terms of things that are coming up this year. So one change though that I think is significant, is really important, that actually is just happening this year. It's a change that's going to come into play starting March 30th of 2026, so the end of this month, is that USCIS is going to change how it is the order in which they're adjudicating petitions. So starting the end of the month, USCIS will take a look at the regional centers in particular, and there is a 956 approval, F956F approval that the regional centers must get. So they submit that to USCIS and they have to get that approved, but they don't have to get it approved before people can start applying for the EB-5 program. But what the government has said is that starting the end of the month, they're only going to adjudicate. So they're going to reorder things, only going to adjudicate petitions where they actually do have that approval. So that's going to push the ones that haven't been approved to the back of the line, and the ones that have been approved, they're going to be adjudicated first. So that's something to keep in mind if you're selecting a regional center. If you haven't applied yet and you're selecting a regional center, because that will definitely impact the timing of when your petition gets approved. So in terms of the changes that occurred in 2022, the investment amount increased from 500,000 to 800,000. On the higher end, it only increased 50,000. It used to be a million. Now, this is a very, very important change that's happening this year. So the regional center program does have to be reauthorized, and it has to be reauthorized periodically. So the next time that it requires reauthorization is going to be September 30th, 2027. And so the reason that's important is because the rules also say that if you file your petition before September 30th, 2026, it will be adjudicated. So the USCIS will be able to continue to adjudicate it. Now, of course, that date is coming up. So the issue is that if you file after that date and then the program doesn't get reauthorized immediately in September 30th, 2027, then the USCIS will just stop adjudicating your petition. And that happened in 2021, where there was a significant delay between when the program was up for reauthorization and when it actually was reauthorized, which put a number of people in limbo, and USCIS couldn't adjudicate petitions. The other big change is that the targeted employment areas and kind of what constitutes a targeted employment area, USCIS is the only one who can determine that now. And then another big change is the carve-outs for set-asides for rural areas, high unemployment, and infrastructure projects. So basically, USCIS has said that they're going to reserve a certain number of petitions in each category, and this had the significant effect of making categories current for a number of nationals who otherwise wouldn't have been current, in particular nationals from China and India. So as a result of that, really anybody right now who's filing an EB-5 regional center petition where they have met the 800,000, or they only have to invest the $800,000 mark, the category is going to be current, which is not the case, would not be the case if these carve-outs weren't there. So the other big change is, and this was a significant change, is that the I-485 petition can be filed concurrently with the I-526. So this is an amazing change because it gives people the ability to be in the United States and stay there and get the benefit of the I-526 filing. Whereas before, unfortunately, what would happen is that you could only file the I-485 petition after the I-526 had been approved. So there was a significant wait, and an individual wouldn't get the visa benefit of filing anything until the I-526 was approved, and that could be a 4 to 5 year approval. And as a result of that, you can file work and travel authorization. The other change is that although you can't use the source of funds, you can't use the money on administrative fees, you do have to show where you got the money to pay those fees, where you got that money from. And there were other changes that gave you the ability to change programs if the regional center failed. So the next slide, I think we're going to go by 2 slides now. I think okay, no, sorry, this one's good. This one's okay. So some other considerations that we'll run through now is that, and this applies to the situation where you are doing direct investment and let's say that you're starting a business and then you want to apply for EB-5, you can't just open up a business entity, open a bank account, and then put $800,000 in the bank account and then apply for an EB-5 because the government doesn't consider that amount at risk. And at risk means that you've spent some of it, and have commitments for others. So commitment could be lease, it could be employees, et cetera. So it's not just the intent to invest that is enough. You do have to actually show more than that. Loans and gifts are fine, but you do have to show that where did the person who loaned the money or gifted the money, where did they get the money from? Unsecured loans are fine as well. And if you do have a secured loan, then you do have to show where you obtained the money to get the security. So that's something to keep in mind. EB-5 doesn't work really well for purchasing a business because if you're purchasing a business, it means that you're giving money to the seller, and the government says that that doesn't meet the link to the job creation requirements. So that's not, that doesn't work, unfortunately. But that does work for E2. So you do have to kind of, if you're converting from E2 to EB-5, you do have to keep that in mind. And when you can still do it, but it just you would have to the amount that you invested, like let's say you purchased a business for $800,000, then that $800,000 wouldn't count. But then if you then had the business and then invested another $800,000 in the business, that could count. And as I said before, there's no requirement of how much you have to own. It can be a fractional. You have to own something, but it can be even a fractional percentage. You can't have any guaranteed return for your investment. You can't have any provisions in the agreement that say that you're able to redeem your shares to get money back. You have to spend the money on qualifying activities. And the I think we talked already about moving from E2 to EB-5 in terms of, kind of the source of funds is going to be different. You can't use buying a business as a source for this. And the job creation for E2 is not specific, whereas the job creation for EB-5 is 10 full-time jobs. And we're going to go past the case study. Yeah, perfect. So what else should you be aware of? So time and consideration. So EB-5, unfortunately, it takes a long time. So it can take 4 to 5 years for an EB-5 petition, the I-526 petition, to be approved. One kind of positive thing is if you are investing in a rural area, and that's a rural area that has the approved designation as a rural area, those petitions can be approved within 6 months to a year. So that's a much faster turnaround time. And but you do have to consider if you are here and you're doing EB-5 and you are going to be here for a while, you do have to make sure that you're taking a look at the visa that you have and making sure you have some underlying basis for being here. That could be a basis of the I-485 being filed. It could be a basis for an underlying E2 or some other underlying visa, but that is something that you have to keep in mind. And if your visa is a visa that, let's say you're on a TN visa or something like that, then that's not a dual intent visa. So you do have to kind of, if once you file the EB-5 petition, you do have to be conscious of, kind of applying for a renewal once that's been filed. So you do have to kind of make sure you're paying attention to what it is you're doing. Parallel green card strategies, we often have people who pursue EB-5 and other green card strategies, whether it's marriage to a US citizen, or we had one case where the person did an NIW and as well as doing the EB-5. The NIW was a riskier case, but it ended up getting approved, so they ended up going with that. But really, planning, I think, is the key with respect to making sure that you're planning this because the time frame extends over an extended period of time, and you want to make sure that you are you're planning and have your ducks in line. Perfect. So those were all the prepared remarks that I had, and certainly we have time for any questions that anybody has.
Okay, let's take a look at any questions. Okay, we don't have any questions. Okay, there was a actually great presentation that certain things are making huge difference between E2 and EB-5, and you guys need to Keep in mind about September 30th, 2026, which is very key mark days. So if you guys don't have any questions, thank you for all joining us today. We hope this webinar has been very helpful for your planning of EB-5 application. And if you have any additional questions, please feel free to visit our website and schedule a consultation with our team. We look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all. Take care. Bye-bye.